Hello everybody, and beautiful afternoon here in Dublin. So thought I'd go out and get another video done. So today's video I wanted to talk about the obsession that a lot of people in the United States seem to have from an Irish perspective anyway, regarding war, violence, gun rights, etc. Now, caveat to this, not everybody is like this, okay? Broad strokes here with regards to everything that I'm going to say. There are many millions of people who this doesn't apply to and who are completely against everything that I'm going to say here. But from an Irish perspective, from sitting here in Ireland looking at the States, especially the modern United States, there seems to be an unhealthy obsession with regards to violence and war in American media and culture. Is this good? Is this bad? Well, it's not for me to really judge. I'm just pointing it out and trying to understand the origin of this, where it originates out of, and why it is that we here in Ireland don't have a similar style of culture, and the historical context with regards to it. So, that being said, here in Ireland, when we look at the United States, we often think of a lot of the positive aspects to it. The Big Apple, American freedom, the land of plenty, etc. We also think of all of the cultural aspects that have dominated or have, for good and for bad, the world. McDonald's, for example, burgers, chips, the movies, etc. So, but unfortunately, especially in the last, we'll say, 20 years since 9/11, we are seeing more and more of people commenting on the American obsession with violence. This goes from everything from MMA fighting, which, yes, I know I'm going to get in the comments that one of the most famous MMA fighters, Conor McGregor, is an Irishman. Trust me, not many Irish people like that guy. But going on from that, gun violence, the glorification of war, movie, games and videos, in films, and all of this sort of attitude that violence is something that is maybe not positive, but definitely something that is felt in a kind of a more machoistic and happy, well, not so much happy, but more of a machoistic style. To be good at war is to be seen as being tough guys, hard people that others will respect. So where does this come from? Well, first off, the US, when it was started off, when it was the British colonies, they were kind of arriving in the land that did have people there, right? The Native American tribes were already there, and also later on you had competition with other colonial groups such as the French and the Dutch. So there was always this aspect of living on the colonies, having your gun, protecting your land. A lot of people who would have gone to the United States as well as immigrants, especially from Britain, would have gone in search of land and in search of opportunities that they couldn't get back home. The second major thing, so the gun was already well in American culture by that stage, by the very early stages. The second thing is that the United States was founded very radically by a revolution, one of the very first real revolutions that were successful against an imperial power. Simon Bolivar's revolutions in South America were happening shortly after, and other parts of the world would take over 100, almost 200 years before they would gain freedom from imperialism. So America was kind of like the first one out of the gate, and it was also the first country to really put into effect modern democracy. The idea of voting for a president rather than having a hereditary king wasn't really there anywhere else in the world up until that point. Yeah, okay, there was historical precedents which they heavily influenced the American system, but there was nothing in the modern world. So this new radical, very strange looking country, with its democracy and its division of power and its violent genesis into the world, really affected how the United States would see itself going forward, where violence under certain circumstances would be seen as a positive thing. This is kind of reinforced as well when in the War of 1812, basically the new United States and the British Empire fought themselves to a standstill. So it showed that not only was violence justified, but violence could and should be used to maintain your freedoms and maintain your position in the world, and to show the world that you're worthy of that position. Later on in history, then you've got the expansion out west. You've got various different wars with Mexico and with Spain, which all just are basically prolonging this idea that the United States needs to show the world in an aggressive way that it's tough. The gun becomes really central to the whole ethos of the United States, especially in the Western expansion. Like, look at the cowboy mythos. All right, basically a gunslinger, an outlaw gunslinger, whose primary means of negotiation, I suppose, is a revolver. So all of this gets added into the ethos with regards to the gun and violence and war in America. When it comes then to the First World War and the Second World War, the United States doesn't join either wars immediately, but joins later on, because democratic countries don't particularly like sending their people or their sons, and in the modern world daughters, out to be killed in a foreign land. But the fact that the United States was on the winning side of both the First and Second World Wars and emerged from it in a very, very strong position meant that again, war becomes solidified in the mind of the American ethos that it brings positive things. Now, and here's the main kicker of the whole thing. All of these wars, all of these battles, all of this destruction, it doesn't affect American cities. All right, it doesn't. You don't see bombed out Boston or bombed out Philadelphia or bombed out New York. All right, not since the War of 1812 was a city razed by an outside power in the United States, and where Washington DC was burned to the ground by British troops. So this idea of war becomes disconnected in the mindset of American people. War is something that happens in other places, and it's some sort of romantic, idealized, wonderful version of life. And even though, yes, Americans had lost an awful lot of troops in the First and Second World War, they didn't nearly lose as many troops as the British, French, Germans, and particularly the Russians had. So also their lands were not actually touched. All right, you don't have a bombed out, as I said, a bombed out Boston, whereas you did have bombed out London. So war is something that happens over there in another place, not something that happens at home. Now, then we go into the Cold War, where the rise of the military-industrial complex and the fact that America makes an awful lot of money out of building, renovating, and creating weapons. This starts you down a vicious cycle that for this part of the American economy, which is a major part of it, you need to have wars. You need to have battles, you need to have aggression, because you need to deplete the stocks so that you can rebuild them again, spending more money. This is a key element to why this culture of war glorification is perpetuated in the United States through movies, through video games, through various other things. You also notice that it's very rare that you will see a movie or a video game where America is actually the bad guys. Again, promoting this idea amongst the population that war is this positive thing that is done outside. And there's very few video games where war takes place in the United States. When it does, it's usually these stalwart group of rebel freedom fighters against the big bad guys, like we'll say I think it was the Homefront video games, I think it was called. But anyway, so you get this then infiltrating into entertainment and into culture that way, which desensitizes people to war, where it basically feels more like a video game than the actual real thing, especially when they see it on TV. The modern war, the current war with Iran, is a good example of this, where they've actually used computer game videos and macho style music to promote this war, especially from White House sponsored videos. So that is a rundown of why it is so embedded into American culture. So how does this differ from Irish culture? Well, we basically had about 50 years of wars going on here, from the 1900 up to around 1950. Either wars going on in Ireland or very close to Ireland. You had the First World War, our 1916 rebellion against Britain, also known as the Easter Rising, the Irish War of Independence, the Irish Civil War, and then you also had the Second World War coming up then a decade after that. So war was always very close to us, and in several of these wars, Dublin in particular got very badly damaged, particularly in wars that took place within the island of Ireland. The 1916 rebellion being a very good example of it. So we had basically 2 generations of almost constant warfare. This left us with a deep psychological scar with regards to warfare and our dislike of it. Then you had the Troubles, which was basically a sectarian conflict, not really a war, but sectarian conflict that took place in Northern Ireland, where warlike activities such as car bombs, explosions, shootings would be happening on a daily basis, either in Northern Ireland or here in the Republic of Ireland or in our neighbour Britain next door. So we've seen the scars of war. These days, we still people of my generation in particular who grew up during the time of the Troubles, we understand that war is not a computer game, or war is not a video game, and war is not something to be glorified. We understand that war is something to be avoided at all costs, which is the primary reason as to why Ireland is a neutral power. Well, neutral, not power is being a bit too big of a term. A neutral country, we'll say, yeah. We don't like getting involved in wars, and we don't really want to get involved in wars, but being neutral militarily does not mean to say we are neutral in other ways. We do support Ukraine, for example, in their conflicts against Russia. Being a European, you've got like wars in Europe going on for centuries, millennia even. And those wars do leave a very strong indication on people's minds. We also have, as Europeans, the threat of Russia next door to us, and the threat of another war looming very, very close. And this is one of the key things here. Except for China, there is no real country that can threaten the United States anymore. And even China isn't really interested in the US mainland. So there's no threat. War is just a game. War is just something that happens in other places. War is something tragic that happens to somebody down the street where their son or daughter doesn't come back. But there is no real... It doesn't really feel real because it isn't real. That's the American perspective from that's the American view from an Irish perspective anyway. Will this ever change? Probably not. It's too ingrained in the culture. But there is one huge issue with regards to it. First off, war does become very real when you have a lot of bodies coming home. Look at the Vietnam War and the scars that's put on the United States, kept it from entering another war for generations. Unfortunately, in the modern world, that doesn't seem to have taken root after the Afghan and Iraq wars. So we'll just have to see. This Iran war is starting to become very, very, very tricky, but we'll just have to see how that turns out. Anyway, that's my perspective with regards to America and war. Have a good day.